Hi, everyone. You're all very welcome to this online unveiling of two very important portraits, two portraits of Mother Jones, the Irish labour rights activist from the late 19th, early 20th century. You can see one of the two portraits beside me, and the second portrait will hang in our embassy in DC. You'll see that in just a short moment. These two portraits form part of an initiative that we're calling the If Walls Could Talk initiative, which is based on a really simple premise. It asks if the walls of our consulate could speak, what would they say about Ireland, our values, and the contribution of the Irish diaspora to the Midwest and to the US generally. Mother Jones is a perfect first choice for a commission as part of this initiative. We're very lucky that the embassy, as I said, also has a portrait as well. And now I will hand over to our ambassador, Dan Mulhall, to tell you a little bit about Mother Jones, and you'll get an opportunity to see their portrait as well. Ambassador, please.
I'm delighted to be here together with our Consul General in Chicago, Kevin Byrne, to unveil portraits of a remarkable Irish woman who crossed the Atlantic as a young girl in the 19th century and went on to make a huge contribution to her adopted home. Mary Harris was born in Cork in 1837. At the age of 10, during the height of the Great Famine, which devastated Ireland and produced an outflow of people of enormous quantity, she and her family crossed the Atlantic, settled first in Toronto, then in Michigan, then in Chicago. And finally, she went to Tennessee, where in Memphis she met George Jones, who was an iron foundry worker and a member of the relevant union at that time. Sadly, in 1867, her husband and her 4 children died in a yellow fever epidemic. She went back to Chicago and took up the art of dressmaking, only for her dressmaking shop to be destroyed in the Great Fire of 1871, which devastated the city of Chicago. She went into a period of obscurity, and we know little about her life until she re-emerged remarkably in the early 20th century as an advocate for the rights of workers, an activist, and a union organizer. She became one of the most famous, and some would say notorious, women in America because of her advocacy for the rights of workers and child laborers and so forth. Mother Jones, she became known as Mother Jones because of the affection which she was held by the miners she represented. When she died in 1930, she was buried at Mount Olive Cemetery in Illinois. I visited the site of her grave. It's remarkable to see the scale of the monument built by the miners she represented in her memory. Remember, this monument was built during the height of the Great Depression, and yet the miners were dedicated to her memory to the point where they raised the money and were able to build this impressive monument. So today, we recognize Mother Jones in these fine portraits by Lindsay Hand. I want to thank him for bringing Mother Jones to life in these fine portraits. These are part of a series we're doing to celebrate with paintings and works of art the remarkable connection between Ireland and America, epitomized by people like Mother Mary Jones. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you very much for that. As you can see, there was a costume change. Mother Jones is wearing red in the embassy and blue here. I'm now going to introduce you to our panel. We've got a panel of a number of female union leaders here who are going to speak to us about the contribution of Mother Jones to their lives and the contribution of Mother Jones to their work. So you can really get a sense of the importance of Mother Jones's contribution here in the Midwest and to the US more generally. And we're also very lucky to have our artist, Lindsay Hand, and she'll speak to us about, I suppose, the creative process and really how she came to discover and to meet Mother Jones in her work. Our panel is Lindsay Hand, our artist. I'll speak to Lindsay first. Then we have Sheila Gainer, who is a union leader for Unite Here, which supports the rights of hospitality workers here in Illinois. We'll then go to Pat Meade, again, a union leader for the Illinois Nurses Association. And then finally, we'll go to Deborah Cosey Lane, who's the now president of the Amalgamated Transit Union here in Illinois. But first, we'll go to Lindsay. Lindsay, thank you so much for your work. We discovered the work of Lindsay Hand. She painted a portrait, quite a very large portrait, in the Irish American Heritage Center here in Chicago of Mother Jones, and through that we discovered, the real strength of Lindsay's work. And as you can see beside me, it really brings across, I suppose, the strength and fortitude of Mother Jones. So, Lindsay, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening for this unveiling.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
Lindsay, I might just ask if you can just maybe speak a little bit to how you discovered Mother Jones. I know you've got a really interesting story for how you discovered her, and how she became part of your work.
Yeah. So about, I would say 2007, I was working in a little restaurant downtown. I had moved to the Springs not too long before that. I'm from here, but the man who owned the building of the restaurant I worked in was a great supporter of all the people who worked there, particularly our local artists. And I received nothing but love from that community and an appreciation for the work we did. And he was a lawyer, a union. He worked for unions. He was what's the word? Workman's comp lawyer. So he had a passion for the story of Ludlow, since he had traveled through Colorado when he was a young boy, and he was inspired and moved out here later. And he often went down to the memorial, and he asked me if I would do a piece inspired by that, a mural type piece size, sort of a storytelling piece. And I did. He's a very special person in my life. So with his support, just through working in the community there, and I have a very old friend in town actually who worked there with me, and we have, except for that, I'm gonna tear up. I know what it's like to work 2 to 3 jobs, and I know what it's like to be a hospitality worker. And just, I appreciated him so much. He passed away about 4 years ago. And I had never heard of Ludlow, and it struck me and was interesting to me that I had never heard of it. And why wasn't this being taught in the schools? I had never heard really much of the labor movement. If it had been brought up at all, it was a little bit in one ear and out the other. Nothing was really amplified about it. So when he brought it up, I went down there, I visited, I started researching. That was sort of the beginning of my painting and work as research-based, historically research-based, particularly for this. And that introduced me into this whole world of not just the labor movement, but people, women like Mother Jones. And if you aren't familiar with the Ludlow Massacre, it is when the UMW came out and tried to unite and get everybody they went on strike to join a union, and the militia, the National Guard, all of the, Baldwin Felts were brought out. The tent colony was burned after the union leader, Louis Tikas, was shot in the back. Just this incredible story. And leading up to that, Mother Jones had come out and rallied these people and really supported them and promoted them. And after just really, and she was even put in jail at some point out here. And there's this great image that I found that are the women marching through the streets of Trinidad, Colorado, carrying signs. And there's one of a woman carrying a sign that says, Mother Jones has not done anything we would not do. And that struck me of the kind of woman who comes up and brings the best out of you and says to stand and march, and this is what you deserve, and this is what you work for. Basic workers' rights. And I love that in turn they supported her and carried her story on. So that is how I met Mother Jones. And I really clung on to that. I just had never really had a sort of hero, you know, and she was it. Like the story, what she believed in, where she came from in her life is what hit me the most. First of all, it was inspiring. You could read her speeches, how she, you know, marched with the children, the mill children, and all of that was incredible. But then to find out the life she had come from, you know, coming out here through the famine, total devastation. She was a teacher. She had a family, 4 children, all wiped out in a pandemic, her husband and children. From there, she went and had a dress shop burned in the Chicago fire. And even through all this pain and hurt, this strong Irish woman who obviously came with a lot of grit to this country, took all her pain, and she never even really spoke about that. And that's something noted about her. But in her expression and her inspiration and the pulling of the people together, I think it was really apparent that she knew what hardship and devastation was. And she had transmuted that pain into something inspiring and took that love and gave it to children who didn't have someone, and to women immigrants who had nothing and were just so exploited by the company men. And she just took that and supported them. Honestly, like last night, I don't know if you watched Biden's speech, but I thought of her and I thought of his life, and I just thought it was beautiful. And I thought of him and his Irish heritage and the pain he's been through. And there's sort of that parallel there, I feel. I know he's not a woman, and that's not the topic here, but he is Irish descent and Irish Catholic. And I was tearing up, and it made me think of her and her leadership and the tragedy she'd come from, and taking that and using it for a greater good purpose.
Yeah, no, thanks, Lindsay. And that's why, you know, we were keen when we were thinking about who is the best representative, or the first person that we want up on our wall to really represent, I suppose, that struggle that, you know, the diaspora members have gone through, or that immigrants have gone through when they come to the US. The waves and waves of Irish immigrants that came over centuries. And they did go through great hardship, but then that they gave and contributed so much. And I think what's really interesting, and we'll hear from Pat Meade later of the Illinois Nurses Association. So often you see Irish immigrants going into those caring professions, those professions that kind of help to build and sustain community. And I think it's really interesting that, that you mentioned that there's sort of parallels maybe in the Irish immigrant story about when Irish immigrants come over, what they give to America. And Lindsay, I might just ask you, we've got one of the portraits beside us. I know you can't see it very well on the Zoom. We have photos that will pop up on our social media so that you can see them better. And then we really look forward to welcoming you all at some stage in person, so you can look at the portrait up close. What should folks be looking out for when they look at the portrait? I know one of the things we were really keen that your painting gets across, and I can say, seeing it and having her sit beside me here is just, I suppose, the real humanity of Mother Jones, and it really does come across here. But you might just, for folks that are going to be looking at the portraits, what might they look out for, either here or in DC?
I think it's funny because I kind of went off on her story, and that's what it is. Like, that's what she is to me, and that's what I'm feeling. And sometimes it's just like that, but through my hand. And I'm honestly probably better at doing that than speaking about it. But that movement and that inspiration from her, we had discussed what colors should we use, and you said blue. It's such a helpful color, and I think it was very powerful to be able to use that and have that sort of windswept, because she just was this movement. She was constantly moving, like my home, where's your home? It's where, wherever they need me, basically. And so I think that I tried to use a looseness in the strokes, but I looked for a formality as far as technique. I originally was trained in more of a Rembrandt style oil portrait painting. And then I expanded that, and the Ludlow paintings have a sort of different version of that. And then with these portraits, with Fanny Selland's one, I added another layer of technique and color. And that is the turn of the century there, when the portrait artist was John Singer Sargent, and doing the portraits of all these sort of elite, and having come from Europe, and who's who has their portrait done by him. And I kind of took that palette, and I was like, these are the elite, strong, wonderful women that came at this turn of the century. And I wanted to take those gorgeous photos that were taken of them back then and translate into what it would look like if they had sat for their portrait.
Wonderful. No, it's great. And actually, I'm obviously on camera, so I can't be turning my head all the time. But one of the things that we've all noticed is that, you kind of mentioned, like, there's such a vibrancy about Mother Jones. There's such an energy to everything you hear about Mother Jones. And I think that's one of the things that the painting really captures. It's really, you feel a real presence when you see the portrait. And then as well, it's wonderful. It kind of looks like she came in and she sat for 2 minutes, and she's like, I gotta go, I got more stuff to do. Like, that real sense of almost urgency in her, very powerful pose, but she's like, here I am, I got things to do. Lindsay, thank you so much. We look forward to welcoming you up to the Consulate, when it's safe to do so. We're going to have a launch in person. We'll hope you'll be able to join us for that. But thank you so much. She's a phenomenal addition to the Consulate, and a great person, I think, for us to have as the first commission as part of our If Wolves Could Talk initiative. So Lindsay, thank you so much. Next, we are delighted to have Sheila Gainer, who is union leader for Unite Here, as I said, for hospitality workers here in the US. Sheila, please, we'd love to hear the impact Mother Jones has had on your life and work. Sheila, over to you.
Thank you so much for having me and for me to speak on such a wonderful topic. I did hear also similarly, I did not hear about Mother Jones until I was an adult, and actually when I was first entering the labor movement. And at that time, I hadn't yet decided that this is where I wanted to spend my life. I was young and I was involved in a campaign in a place where I worked. And to be a woman in the labor movement is sort of a process of unlearning everything you've been taught about how to be a nice woman, how to be polite and how to be a helper and smooth things over. And then you enter this movement where it's like, well, actually you have to be the opposite of all of those things. And of course, there's the giants of the labor movement, and the people you hear about are all men for whom that behavior is encouraged and acceptable. And I remember being at a protest and someone holding up a sign of Mother Jones with her famous quote, "Pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living." And I was like, oh, what is that? And I started reading more about Mother Jones and talking to people about her. And it was electrifying as a young woman in the labor movement to read her story, because she had none of the hallmarks of power. I mean, she was a woman, she was an immigrant, she was poor, she was older, and armed with nothing more than just a fierce moral compass and a dogged determination. She changed lives for hundreds of thousands of people for generations. And it had a massive impact on me of what one person can achieve through a life of service and organizing. And I think really was incredibly inspiring about what's possible. And of course, I had an affinity for her, and I like to credit my own moral compass and determination to my grandmother. Aside from being a labor leader, I'm also the very proud granddaughter of Irish immigrants. And my grandmother, also named Mary, came to Chicago from a very small rural village when she was 19 years old, and came here to support her two sisters and her parents. And it must have been amazingly overwhelming to go from such a small place to a huge place. And she moved in with a relative that she had never met. And to hear Mother Jones's story, it made me think so much of my grandma, who I was blessed to have for many years. And growing up with her, she really was just the most amazing example of, do not let life's challenges do not be daunted by the size of the world's challenges. And it could not have been easy for her to leave her family and come here and build a new life. But you never would have known, because she soldiered on and was a great example of, no matter how insurmountable life seems, you are actually capable of much more than you think you are. So Mother Jones and my grandmother are very much connected for me, and I'm grateful to the both of them, because I don't think I'd be who I am without them. So
Wonderful, Sheila. Thank you so much, and thanks for sharing that personal story as well. Your grandmother sounds like a really phenomenal individual.
Yeah.
One of the things that we do here in the Consulate is we try to make connections. We try to keep the connections between Ireland and America strong, and foster them and strengthen them even further. And I suppose for us, I hadn't heard of Mother Jones before I came out here last September, and really hearing the story of Mother Jones and the contribution that she's had on people's lives and the real impact she's had on people's lives is really, it's been a really wonderful revelation. It makes our job easier to do when you've got great people, be they historical or current, that help to make those connections strong. And I think, Sheila, in the story that you shared, and Lindsay as well, you can really see that Mother Jones, not only has she made a contribution, but she continues to make that contribution. And I think that for us is one of the reasons we're so excited, to have her as part of the Consulate team here. She, when you come in, you'll see she's got pride of place. And I know when you see, if folks manage to get to the embassy, you'll see her there as well. So for us, it's, she's someone we're very proud of, and proud of the contribution that she's made, and particularly here in the Midwest. The ambassador obviously spoke of going down to her gravesite and being surprised just by the sheer size of it. And really, I think she's someone that really stands large in that the contribution of the Irish diaspora here in the Midwest and right across the state. So we're delighted to be able to celebrate great women, as well as the many great men that there have been as well. So thank you, Sheila, for that. Next, we'll go to Pat Meade. Pat is a union leader for the Illinois Nurses Association. Before Pat speaks, I just want to take the opportunity to thank Pat and all of the members of her association for all the work that they've done over this last year. It's been a difficult year for everybody, but without our healthcare workers really on the front line, we wouldn't have gotten through it. So really to thank her and her members for that. So I'll hand over to Pat. Please, Pat, share your impressions and the impact of Mother Jones on your life.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Meade, and I am the president of Illinois Nurses Association. And it is such an honor to be here to speak of Mother Jones. Mother Jones, less than 5 feet tall, was just an icon of what caring for your fellow man really looks like and really is. She walked the walk. She lost everything, her family, all of her belongings in a fire, but she didn't sit down. She rose back up, and she made her life's work looking out and protecting others, to make sure that in the workplace, you are able to do the job you're supposed to do, but in a means that is safe, and that you are getting paid a decent wage, and that you are being represented. Unions were so blessed to have her because she was the union. She never failed at being there when called on. She walked this United States of America on behalf of the working men, women, and children. And this is why we so aspire to be like her, to remember her, That when we are in the midst of a strike, who do we call for? We call for Mother Jones, and she comes, because all we have to do is look up at that woman, and we see the strength and all that she has done for her fellow working men, women. When you're in the battle, sometimes you think that it's going to be too much and it's unwinnable, but you need to go back and just look at her history and all that she was able to accomplish in times that it seems almost imaginable. She walked through yellow fever. We walked through COVID. But we can look to her and see that she did it, and she did it, and she brought her fellow man with her. She did not turn her back. She did not leave them behind. She continued to lift them up and elevate them to a level that was who they were and the job they did. We struggle still today with some of the same things that were going on back in the 20s. But we're going to continue to survive because we have models of strength and tenacity and good as those such as Mother Jones. Her motto, we've said it on the strike line: pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living, because that's what nurses do. And that's what we will continue to do. And now during COVID, we're going to stand up. We're going to continue to stand up, and we're going to fight for our patients, regardless of what that looks like, because we have a model that did just that. Back in the day when it was unthinkable that a woman could do something like that, but she did. So it gives us the strength. When we look to her and what she was and what she brought to the unions across the United States, it gives us pause. But the pause that it brings us is that we can do this, and we will do this. And as Mother Jones travels across the United States and across Illinois and up in Chicago at UIH and SEIU on our strike line where we needed her, she now is going to have a home, a most deserved home. And we are so proud to be a part of that. So again, Mother Jones, we thank you for being who you are and who you were and what you leave for us. We only pray that we can be as strong as you, continue to fight like you. And again, like you told us, pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living. Thank you, Mother Jones, for everything, because you are our idol.
Pat, thank you so much for that. It's really wonderful to hear the impact that Mother Jones has had on your life and your work. Thank you for sharing that. Next, we'll go to Deborah Cosey Lane, the president of the Amalgamated Transit Union here in Illinois. Deborah's joining us from just being elected the president of her organization. So Deborah, we'll go to you, please. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the impact of Mother Jones and the importance, I suppose, of recognizing her here in the consulate. And I know that you're very involved in a project called the Mother Jones Heritage Project here in Illinois, which is seeking to get a statue of Mother Jones in downtown Chicago. And that's a project that we here in the consulate, as part of, not the consulate, the government of Ireland has given a contribution towards that statue. So we hope to see Mother Jones not just on the walls of the embassy and the consulate, but also proudly on the streets of Chicago again. So Deborah, please, over to you.
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here and for you all to select me to speak on such a great giant and a person that's so dear to me, representing women in labor movement. I first learned of Mother Jones at one of my Polk conferences with Emily and Stephanie as my leaders, as teachers. And when Mother Jones was introduced to us and we found out the history of Mother Jones, the sacrifice she made for working class to make all men, women to be created equal in the workplace, it really just blew my mind. And I always say that I equate Mother Jones to my favorite woman, Harriet Tubman. Like, they were tough women and they understood what humanity was all about, and to make people feel like human beings when they were at their workplace, and not to have that slave mentality, you know, in the workplace, and to really educate and teach people their worth in the workplace. So I stand on their shoulders as an organizer, a secretary treasurer, a lobbyist, and now the president of the Illinois Joint Conference, in educating people on their worth. You know, I like Mother Jones saying, I'm not a humanitarian, I'm a hellraiser. And to some, hellraiser might be like a feisty person, a negative. No, for me, when we're talking about being a hellraiser, we're talking about equality for all people. It's a good thing. Like John Lewis used to say, fight the good fight. Mother Jones wanted to fight the good fight for all people. And I just think that it is time for her to be recognized in Chicago, really across the world, but to have a statue for her in the city of Chicago, which is known to have giants and strong individuals. I think that we need that. We need that. I need to view that, you know, so that we can teach our young ladies, and so that we can teach people in the labor movement, you know, that this is what empowerment looks like. Every time there's her statue, this is what sacrifice looks like. Every time they see their statue, this is what unselfish serving looks like. It looks like Mother Jones. And we all have a sense of Mother Jones deep down in our hearts. And that's why I really want this statue to be done in Chicago.
Perfect. Deborah, thank you so much. Such passionate words. And you mentioned John Lewis there when you spoke. The portrait beside me is one of two portraits that will hang, one here in the consulate in Chicago and one in our embassy in DC, to really recognize the contribution of Mother Jones to the labor movement here in the States, and as a symbol of the strength of the Irish diaspora here in the States. And she hangs on the walls of the embassy alongside a portrait of John Lewis, which was unveiled by our ambassador just over St. Patrick's Day, and some other strong leaders in the social justice and civil rights movement in Ireland and here in the States. So Deborah, thank you so much for that contribution. It's really clear in the passion with which you speak, just the impact that you mentioned Mother Jones has had on your life and work. So thank you for that. And again, our congratulations to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And we're going to keep this fight until we get it done for Mother Jones, because she got it done for us. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Thank you. Take care.
I want to thank all of our speakers here tonight. I want to thank Lindsay, our artist, not just for speaking, but also for sharing her gifts with us. I want to thank Sheila for sharing her stories, to Deborah and to Pat as well for sharing their contributions. We look forward to being able to welcome you in person to the consulate at some point in the future when it's safe. And then you'll get to see Mother Jones up close. So I want to thank you all for joining us this evening, and please do check the links and photos on social media where you'll get to see the portraits in a bit more detail. Thank you all.